today's conversation we have is around suicide, whether that's having suicidal feelings yourself or supporting someone that is. It's a scary topic for all of us, but it was a really important one for us to have some sort of understanding and have some tools if we're ever in that space. So yeah, Jess does an amazing job taking us through all of that.
Yeah, so this is a huge topic, Ben, as we said, talking about, how to have the conversation around suicide or support people that might be feeling that way. So before we get into that, we're going to have a quick look at some of the stats around suicide in Australia. So as we can see, a few of the stats there are pretty astounding. More than 3,000 people in Australia in a typical year, more than 8 people a day die by suicide. Men 3 times more likely to die by suicide than women, and it's one of the leading causes of death for Australians between ages 15 and 44, as well as a significant cause of premature death in Australia, and Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people nearly twice as likely to die by suicide. So it's pretty huge.
Yeah, I'm glad we're talking about it today because it is such a scary topic for so many people. I know for me professionally and personally, like when I've heard that someone is thinking about committing suicide or having suicidal thoughts, I've been a little bit overwhelmed in knowing how to support people in that space.
For sure.
So I'm really glad that we're talking this through today. I think it's really powerful.
And that's exactly why we want to have this conversation, is to try and maybe just shed some light and help equip people a little bit better. So one of the first things we'll take a look at is warning signs. So as we can see, there's a few different things that might be happening. Again, it's going to be unique to each person, but if they are starting to say things around that they're feeling like they're a burden to others, if you believe that they have access to harmful means, there could be dramatic changes in mood and behaviour, feeling worthless, talking about death, a history of suicidal behaviour, risky behaviours, substance abuse, a whole bunch of things there that can be a warning sign. So it's important, I think, sometimes to understand first and foremost what are the warning signs, and then from there we can take the next steps. And it's going to look different for everyone, and I do want to just say as well that this is not always typical. So warning signs might be there, but sometimes, unfortunately, it's very hidden. So we're not always going to be aware of what's going on in someone's world, and that's often the shock of suicide, is people go, but they were so happy, but they had so much, or they seemed really good. So it's a tricky one. Sometimes there's warning signs and sometimes there's not.
That's definitely been my experience actually, is like the shock, sometimes of suicide, not knowing that there was anything significant going on in their life. It's almost like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah. And
so that happens a bit?
Yeah, it really does, and that's one of the hardest parts of it. And that's not on you, it's not on anyone around that person, because people are very good at hiding. So, but it's a difficult one. But
so how do you deal with that survivor's guilt then, if you if you didn't see it or feel like you could have, should have done something? What would be a good way to process that?
We're going to touch on this a little bit, but just remembering you are not responsible for others. It's really hard, but it's so important to debrief this stuff and go and talk to someone yourself about what you're experiencing and understand that you're not alone in that, and that people are ultimately responsible for their own actions. So there's things that we can learn and do and maybe try and have conversations around, which is what this video is going to be about, checking in on how we can have some of those conversations. But that could be a whole nother thing, but definitely talk to someone about it, because we cannot be responsible for other people's feelings or actions. And it's really hard sometimes to separate ourselves from that, though. So it's a difficult one, big one, but talk to someone, I would suggest. So we're going to sort of take a look at how we might start having that conversation if we're worried about someone. It's a hard one. It's not easy.
It's a scary one.
Yeah. So, one of the first things is, if you are worried about someone, pick the time and the place that you're going to talk to them. Don't suddenly confront them in the middle of work or in the middle of when they're feeling agitated or stressed. So if you're worried and you want to have a conversation, pick a time and a place that it can be quiet, free of distraction, where you're both pretty calm as well, because it's important for you to be calm too, because then you're not going to feel it. It's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
But pick your time and place as best as possible. So
Okay.
one thing, and like, you know, you can break the ice first. So, you know, how are you going? How's life? You know, is there anything you're struggling with? Or you might even say, hey, look, I've had a really tough week this week and it was, you know, so I'm just wondering how you are. Or you might notice some things, you might make some observations of what you've seen that's concerning you. So don't jump straight into it, break the ice a little bit, and then sort of get into what's concerning you. The next one is the hard one that the people get afraid to ask, is actually asking direct questions. So if...
Almost feels like you're pushing them in that direction by asking those kind of questions.
And that's exactly everyone's response in
Okay.
that why they don't want to ask that question, but it's actually not the case. And
Right.
you look at anything around suicide prevention or having conversations around suicide or counselling training, you ask the question directly. It doesn't actually, because if someone's got that going on for them, it's there already.
Yeah, I think it's just so counterintuitive.
Yeah, so it's, you know,
You feel like you're making it worse. Oh, I feel like I'm making it worse.
and you're not actually making it worse. So, you know, it's hard, but asking those questions, if someone is starting to say, yeah, look, I just don't want to live anymore, I don't want to, you know, ask them, have you thought about suicide?
Okay.
Ask that
Just
direct
come straight
question.
out.
Yeah, have you been thinking about suicide?
Okay.
And even if they have been, do you have a plan? Have you thought about how? Because, you know, the more information, I guess, that you have, the more sort of you understand how safe they are in that moment or not.
Okay.
And it can open up a conversation as well. So it is really tricky. And again, like with all of this, gosh, we're human, okay? So there's no expectation to be an expert or perfect at this. It's just, the more you know, the more you'll sort of, if you are in that situation, you might find your way a little bit easier than perhaps if you didn't know. We'll still probably fumble, but don't be afraid to ask that direct question. If someone is sharing with you that they are feeling that way, you know, make sure to acknowledge what they're feeling. Acknowledge that they've told you and thank them for opening up. And when it normalised, but in a way that is, you're not alone in this. You know, other people have been through this journey as well. You're not the only one. Just not to compare, but just to show them that, you know what, yeah, people do have suicidal thoughts and you're not alone. How can we support you? You know, what are the options here?
I think that's a big one, because I've never had the conversation when someone is thinking about being in that space, but a few people I'm close to have talked about having suicidal thoughts in the past.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's not an super unusual
No.
thing.
Yeah.
Because that's it's not something you tell everybody.
No.
So for them, just the people that have talked to me about that,
Yeah.
it seems to happen reasonably now.
And that's the thing, sometimes people feel very alone in this, and so it's important to know that they're not. And, you know, I've been in situations through counselling that I've had to check in with someone because of something they've raised, whether it be a combination of the way they're feeling right now with the fact that perhaps they've thought about or made attempts in the past.
Okay.
And so I've had to say, you know, are you thinking about suicide now? You know, and thankfully, you know, every time I've asked that question, it hasn't had to go any further. But I've always had to check in, just to be sure. And that's in the counselling context. I've been trained in that space, so that's a different conversation in one sense, but that's what I've been trained to do. I know it's really tricky when you're talking friendships and family.
But that's why we want to have this conversation too. Like, I feel so unequipped in this space.
And I don't know that
And
we'll
so I
ever
wanted to
fully be
hear.
perfectly equipped either, but we'll get to that as well. So, but yeah, like, acknowledge them and thank them, acknowledge what they're feeling, check in what supports do they have around them. So have you talked to anyone else about this? Is there anyone you can talk to about this? Have you seen a counsellor? Have you seen a psychologist? Have you, just checking in, like what's their support network look like? Because the more that we can help ourselves and them identify who they've got, the more people we can call upon. Or we can encourage them to access their support network whilst they're thinking about this and to talk through it. So, and again, just because someone's thinking about it, it doesn't mean it's necessarily going to happen. So it's good to, this is why we're asking direct questions, because if we can identify someone's thinking about it, that could well be that point where they can go and actually get support and deal with those thoughts and deal with what's causing it. So we do want to know if people are thinking about it. One of the next things to do is to encourage help. So whether that be through their own support network they already have, and if they don't, encourage them to get some sort of help or support. And again, later on we're going to show you some places you can go to and get advice and phone numbers, and there's a whole bunch of links below as well. So it's not something we expect you to have in your head, no one does, but there's a few little pointers that could help in that situation. So so always encourage professional support and help in that area. And if you've got the information, give it to them. It's again not up to you that they actually do anything with that. We encourage that, but it's their choice in the end. But if they've got the information, they may just make that phone call and ask for help. So a couple of things not to say. So we sometimes probably want to respond with things like, look, because we freak out. If we hear that someone is thinking about it, we're going to freak out. That's normal. And we might go, but you've got so much going for you. Or, but no, you can't do that. That'll hurt your family and your friends. So it really...
Why is that a bad one to say?
Because it really minimises what they're feeling. Like if you're saying to someone you've got so much going for you, you're invalidating what they're feeling. They're obviously feeling something enough to be thinking this way. So they might have a lot of success in their life. They might have a lot of stuff or friends, and it might seem like that on the outside, but we can't tell someone about their internal world. We can't judge that for them. So by telling them, but you've got so much going on for you, it's kind of like you're telling me I should be feeling good and I shouldn't feel this way. I can't feel down.
I hadn't thought about that way before, but like if I'm talking to them about the external world, which I think is going really well, but their internal world's falling apart, that's not helping.
It's like telling them they're not allowed to feel that way. Just because you think...
invalidating how they're feeling.
Exactly.
Based on what I think should be making them feel good.
And then, saying things like you're going to hurt your family, or even saying, you're kind of putting a bit of guilt and shame on them. Now, you don't want to add to that. There's probably a lot there already around something. We don't want to be adding to those negative feelings. We don't want to try and guilt trip them out of it or shame them. It's not about, does that make sense? And look, these are really...
I think it's a pretty natural reaction, those
two
things.
100%.
I can hear that they're not... They're not constructive though.
And look, we're only briefly touching on some of these things. So again, I encourage you to actually look more in depth with some of the information we've put below, because that'll help understand why we don't do certain things. But so we also sometimes want to jump in and fix or call their bluff and think that they're not going to, and just go, whatever, as if you would. Or, we need to fix you. I need to provide the solutions. I need to fix your problems. Step back and just hear what they're saying and take it seriously. Don't dismiss them. So if they're not going to feel heard if we try and do that, which can spiral further. And again, with saying all of this, with these things not to say, again, you cannot be responsible for how someone else responds or acts. So we're fumbling, we're human, we'll make mistakes. Ultimately though, we cannot, we want to take off any pressure from ourselves as well. So I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it does.
Trying to argue or debate with them about it, or the ethics of it, or whether it's
Why they
good
should
or
or
bad.
shouldn't. Okay.
Again, not helpful to the situation. They're opening up to you about some really deep stuff, and that needs to be acknowledged, and it's not the time to tell someone that they're right or wrong, and to make them or to exacerbate the situation. So and again, not invalidating by going, oh, just cheer up, you'll be fine. Don't worry about it, you've got heaps going on, you'll be fine. Oh, just cheer up. They're going through something significant. Yeah. So invalidating is not helpful. And a couple of things just around language around suicide. And this might not be in the conversation, but just in general these days as well. They've changed from saying committing suicide to death by suicide or died by suicide or suicided, because the word commit indicates something like you've committed a crime or you've committed a sin. Mm-hmm. And they're just trying to take some of that away from the language around talking to people or about people who have suicided. Okay. Or if someone has previously attempted it, rather than sort of saying it's a failed attempt or an unsuccessful attempt, because that kind of indicates the alternative would be preferable and would be success. And that's not what we want. So they have changed the language a little bit around it. But again, this is all stuff that it's good to know about. It's not always going to sit in our minds. It's, particularly if you're not in that space every day. So it's really understandable if things get forgotten or people say different things. So it's okay. So you might have had a conversation with someone, they are feeling suicidal, they have shared that with you, so what next? All right, that's sometimes the tricky part too. So a couple of things. If you really feel that they're unsafe, or they've said, yeah, I've got a plan in place, it's not the time to leave them on their own. Access those support networks or call a helpline yourself and get advice. We've got some numbers coming up soon. But focus on their safety. Mm-hmm. Remind them that they don't have to act on their thoughts, that there's some options that you can look at for support, and there's hope. So this is different to sort of saying, but you've got everything going for you. It's more saying, yep, you're having those thoughts and you're going through something. You don't have to act on those. Let's look at the options. Let's look at support. Let's encourage hope. People have journeyed through this before and come out the other side. Yeah. And so focus on safety. We've got a couple of resources for you coming up around that. Is there someone else you can call? Be a family member, a friend, their mental health professional, that kind of thing. And again, some numbers coming up soon that you can call in this situation. But anything like this, so if you've had a conversation, you've experienced this, you've been there with someone, self-care for yourself. This is huge. You've been through it, you've had a conversation, you've gone, whoa, whew, that's huge. Whether they've suicidal or not, whether you've experienced that or not, or you've just had a conversation, you need to debrief for yourself. Self-care is really important, and if you've had any of this experience, whether talking to someone about it or supporting someone through it, or you've lost someone that way, then please talk to someone. That's so important. And remember that you are not ultimately responsible. So people, again, sometimes we don't know what people are thinking, so you can't be responsible for that. Yep. So if, I think you shared an example, people you knew that had talked someone off the edge of Yep, there was a lookout. One of the guys I know got involved and actually spoke to the guy until the police came or somebody came. But he was there for a while talking to the guy, and I think it was a guy talking about what he was thinking, and just
yeah, it took a while for him to process that and work through it. Like, it really, I saw him like straight after, like within an hour of it happening, he was super shaken up. And yeah, he talked to Nell, my wife was the counsellor, about it, and I think they had a couple of conversations because it really impacted him. And that was a stranger, that wasn't someone he knew. But just being in that space, really shook him to the core. So.
And it does, and that's okay. Like, it's okay to, you know, however you respond in that situation to, you know, then do what you need to do for yourself as well. So we're going to just quickly touch on professional help and just some resources available as well. Cool. So we're going to have them come up on the screen and we'll go through them. Okay, so the number up at the moment is the mental health line. It's a 24/7 line that you can actually call and ask for advice. The person struggling can also call this number, but if you need advice and you don't know what to do in the situation, you can call that number on the screen. Okay. If it's an emergency, like the situation of your friend or the person you knew that you were talking about, 000. Yeah. If it's right in that place, like call emergency. But mental health line 24/7 is a great one to access if you need some advice. The suicide callback service up on the screen at the moment, it's online and on the phone, offering support for people aged 15 years and over. They're all professionally trained. It's immediate telephone counselling and support in a crisis. But also, if you check out their website, there's a whole bunch of information for people that might be feeling suicidal, or if you are worried about someone who might be and how to deal with that. So great resource as well, but that's a good number as well to have on hand or give to someone who is struggling. We have Beyond Blue, another great resource. They actually have a Beyond Now app. It's a suicide safety planning app. So as you see on the next screen, the step-by-step, so that you can actually create a safety plan, like what are my warning signs, how do I make my space safe, my reasons to live, things I can do, people I can connect with. So this could be something that someone feeling this way creates, or you might suggest to someone who's feeling this way, say, why don't we create a safety plan together? Or this might be done with their mental health professional, but it's a great little app. Lifeline. We all, I think, know about Lifeline. Again, 24/7 trained counsellors online and over the phone, crisis support and suicide prevention. Really great number to have on hand. And this next one, there are so many services available, and these are just a few of them that we've just been through, as well as some additional ones. But we've got a link to this particular PDF in the links below. So we'd encourage you to download it, chuck it on your fridge, chuck it in your phone, give it to someone who might be struggling, put the numbers in your phone, that kind of thing. So those are a few of the services are out there.
Yep.
You know, they're there, trained professional. They've got all the advice put together. They've got the how-to conversations. They've got the phone numbers. They've got the what to do. And that's why they're there. So utilise those resources, because, you know, it is something that touches many of us, and we may come across in our lifetime. No one's expected to be an expert at this, not in everyday life. We're human, but I guess the more we look at this sort of stuff, the more we talk about it, the more we're going to have in our head for if we ever do find ourselves in that situation. We might remember just even one thing. It might just be a phone number we've got on our phone, and then we can go, oh, I don't know what to do. Or it might be just remembering, listen, support, be there, ask the question. Just one thing might help, but so I think check out the resources below, because they're going to be incredibly valuable to you and to people who might be struggling with this. So
thanks for having this conversation, Jess. It's a very powerful one, very poignant, and I really appreciate your time and expertise and energy you put into this one. Thank you.
Not a problem.